So if you can just get this one thing right in your render, it's going to make the whole rest of the environment look a lot better, a lot more realistic and detailed and immersive. And that one thing is the foreground. So the foreground actually takes up a small amount of space in the 3D environment. And that means it's going to be not that hard to just work on this small little area, but it actually takes up a significant percentage of space in the 2D render that we get at the end, right? So what happens is if you can make this one area look really nice and detailed, it has the effect of kind of tricking your brain and creating the illusion that the whole rest of the environment has as much detail as you're showing in the foreground, even if it doesn't at all. So in this one, I'm just going to go over 3 different examples of detailed foregrounds that I've made, and I'll show you my process that I follow to get detailed foregrounds in renders like this, and just how to layer all this stuff together and manage all it. It's actually all stuff that's quite simple and easy and probably stuff you've done before, but just layering it and explaining it in a way that is going to let you create really detailed foregrounds and make it look really nice straight away, and so you can implement it right away into your work. Okay, so the basic process is layering a few different things together in order to create the most detail. And I'll show you this in 1 second in an empty file and explain it in detail, but the basic overview is this, right? There's kind of 3 main layers. One is I start with a nice texture. So that's just a plane with a texture on it. Then I'll add some kind of medium shapes in here. So that could be like rocks, pillars, these like hexagonal things or whatever, just any kind of medium shapes. And then third, I'll add in the small fine details, whether that's like scattering stuff, hand placing small objects, water, whatever. And those 3 things come together to create the most detail that I've been able to add to a foreground and make it look nice with as little effort as possible. Okay, so let's just jump into this scene here and I'll show you what I mean exactly. So there's a whole bunch of shit going on up top. Just ignore all that. What we want to look at here is this down here, right? The foreground. So there's all these different models down here and kind of layers. What I've done is I've just copied and pasted all of just the stuff kind of from the bottom of the stairs down. I've taken all that and I've just copied and pasted it into this empty scene. And I'll just show you this in kind of a no lighting scenario, just so you can see exactly what's going on. And we'll break it down piece by piece as well. So this is literally just copy pasted, same camera angle, same object, same textures, everything, just with everything else removed. And it looks obviously quite different. The lighting does play a big part, and I'll get to that later, but let's just start with this. So this is just copy pasted into here, and I'll just break this down into everything that's happening here. Okay, so let's just start hiding stuff, and I'll bring this in piece by piece. Let's start with the most simple thing, which is just the floor. So this is just a rock plane here. Probably should have subdivided this into like squares, but whatever. So this is just a plane. I've got adaptive subdivision on this. If you don't know what that is, just Google Blender adaptive subdivision. You'll find it. It's pretty easy. And even if you can't do that, if you don't want to figure that out, just subdivide a plane and put on displacement. I'm sure you'll figure that out if you don't know how to do that. So that's layer 1, is just a good texture. Okay, so once you have that, I like to add in some kind of medium shapes that are like fairly detailed. So that could be models you download, it could be cubes, could be make a hexagonal thing, a basalt rock formation, as somebody corrected me and pointed out in the last video. This thing could be anything, right? I've got rocks. I've done this with like pillars. I've done this with cubes. Whatever it is, just depends on the environment you're making. Some sort of medium sized object to kind of interact with the floor. That's going to be what I'll do next. So I've just got things like this. So for example, if I just isolate this, this is using geometry nodes to scatter this. If you want to just copy this setup, that's what it is. There's this hexagonal thing going in there. The technical stuff doesn't matter that much. If you want to hand place this, that's fine too. Basically just some sort of rock or something in this case, where it's like some model that's just adding some detail. And I usually will just kind of place and duplicate a bunch of those in a way that looks nice. And that just kind of takes some trial and error, where you just kind of take one, try a few different models, make a few different models if you want to do that, or download free stuff or paid stuff or whatever, and start putting it in there and just see what's going to work and what's not. And then just once you find something that works, try duplicating that a few times. So I just have this thing, duplicated off to the side, a couple variations, some smaller versions, just whatever I thought kind of looked nice here. And then I've also just got some rocks. These are again from Quixel, And these are just kind of layered. I'll just go into render view over here so you can see this more clearly. These are just kind of layered on there. And when I say layered, I just mean like this model is just placed like intersecting with this other stuff here. So there's nothing special about like layering. It's just like placed objects on top of each other into a pile, and then it'll look good. Okay, so that's that. And then usually at this stage, what I'll do is I'll have like lighting and stuff going on in my actual workflow. But at this stage, when I need more detail, that's when I'll add in stuff like, you know, like extra models, water, scatter some plants or something like that. Any kind of small, fine details, you kind of want to add that at the end. And you notice the trend here that it's going to be kind of a recurring theme in all my renders with any process is like start with the biggest shapes and then move to medium shapes and then move to small shapes at the end. And then that way you can build it up in a way that's very manageable, very easy to control. And then once you can control it, it's easier to get everything to look good and nice. Okay, so that's layer 1, the plane. Layer 2, some kind of medium chunks of stuff, whether it's rocks or whatever. And then layer 3 is going to be, in this case, these 3 things. So I've got water, and I have a bunch of videos on water. There's one posted on my channel. You can go watch that after. That posted it like 2 videos ago on my channel. And then I've got also some random other models of like these things in here. This disappeared for some reason, but they were supposed to be in here. I think they got keyframed out, but it's some other like random pillars from Quixel just kind of thrown in there. And now once I go back here, you will see that this kind of makes a bit more, you know, sense. And yeah, if you haven't seen my recent video on lighting, go and watch that after as well, because that'll kind of cover all whatever's going on here. I will have an advanced or like lighting tricks coming out soon, so stay tuned for that as well. Okay, so that's the kind of process here. Let's move on to the next example where it's going to be the same workflow, but just in a different example so you can understand it more clearly. Okay, so here's the next example, and let's break this down in the exact same way. So I've just copied and pasted, again, all these foreground objects here, just kind of from like here down. I've just copied and pasted all that into a new scene, same camera angle, same objects, nothing changed at all, just with all lighting and other objects removed, so you can see this really clearly. Okay, so if we look at this, it's the exact same situation as before. So if I just hide these other things here, layer 1 is just a ground plane of like a leaf texture from Quixel. So you can get this from wherever, right? It doesn't have to be from Quixel or anything. Wherever you get textures, just find a good texture and have that as the base layer. Kind of refine that and get it looking good before you start adding the other stuff. So, and you'll see the selection looks kind of weird. It's because I'm using the panoramic lens, so if stuff isn't lining up, that's just because of the weird lens I'm using. But anyways, you can see there is a bit of displacement on here. I've just got same kind of setup as before. Displacement map mixed with the noise texture, kind of getting mixed, and then that's running out here. Not a lot of displacement, just enough to where it's kind of making the terrain a bit uneven, but fairly minimal, but does add a level of detail. And same thing again, adaptive subdivision is turned on in here. So that's just layer 1, simple ground plane with displacement, right? Layer 2 in this case is just kind of these medium chunks of stuff. So I've got these logs, I've got these pipes and industrial kind of models that I've made. So this here is just a log from Quixel, duplicated. I think it's only 1 or 2 logs duplicated, and each one's kind of rotated a bit differently. So it seems like a lot, but it's just 2 models, I think. That's all this stuff here. And again, when I say layered, it's just like regular models just kind of thrown, like just chucked on top of that stuff there, right? Just like that. Some big chunks of like rocks. And really the goal at this stage is just to get as much stuff in there as possible without, like you want to cover as much ground as you can, literally with like medium to large sized models, and then kind of get the next level of detail by like getting a big bang for your buck with like detailed models like this. Whether you want to make it, download it, doesn't matter. Just kind of get that kind of stuff in there on top of the ground, and then move to like the smaller layer after that. So in this case, we've got things like, if I bring this in, now it's starting to get more detailed, where we've got like photo scanned roots and stuff. Like these are just photo scans I did on my phone a while ago. So I've got some free models from Polyhaven as well. These are just some roots from there. Same kind of thing probably. And then you can see it's all these kind of smaller things that are layered on top. I've got like ferns. I've got this plane of like flowers in here somewhere too. I'm not sure what happened to that. Oh, this got hidden by accident. But yeah, there's this too, just kind of like an invisible plane with a bunch of flowers scattered on the plane. So that's adding, again, smaller, even smaller level of detail on top of that stuff. And just know that as well, I don't organize it like this in my actual workflow, like layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. I'm doing that just for the tutorial. In my actual workflow, it's a lot less structured than this, but I just want to kind of break it down in a way that makes sense. And this is like a recurring theme in my renders, is like, you know, the exact process that I'm telling you about, just maybe less organized like in here. So yeah, you can see it's the same exact process as before, just kind of in a different setting, right? And then again, the lighting does make a big difference there once you get that in. But it's pretty easy to light stuff like this when you do have like a nice, detailed, good environment to look at, because it's like, it's going to look good in most light, to be honest, like if you can get this stuff right. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. And the cool thing about this is it's an industrial environment, but the same exact process still applies here in an actually even more simplified way. So we're just going to look at the foreground again. If you do want to learn how to make this exact render from scratch and you want to follow along creating it from scratch, this is from the new Cyber Environments course. So I'm not going to spend a bunch of time like shilling the course, but if you do want to learn how to make this exact one, just go and watch that. There's a link below. Okay, so let's take a look at the foreground elements to break this down. So if I just go to scene 1 here, I've copied and pasted again all foreground elements into this new scene here. Same camera angle, same everything, just with no lighting. So let's break this one down. So this one, I'll actually show you the ground texture setup here. This is actually adding quite a lot of detail, so I will go into this. It doesn't look like much is happening in this void here, but if I just show you, like if I hide the background and then add like a highlight in here, that's where you get this kind of like nice reflective floor kind of look, is, you know, when you start having like bright highlights like this. So here's the shading setup for this. If I just look at the object here, we've got, this is just a free texture from Polyhaven. So the only thing I'm using is the base color and the normal map. I'll get to the normal map in a second, but the base color is just going in there unaltered, just a concrete texture. For the roughness rather, I'm using a noise texture. With these settings, just like scale, detail, roughness turned up on the noise texture. The noise texture is running into a color ramp to kind of crunch it, and that's going into the roughness. So that's the full roughness map is just removed and replaced with a noise texture. And then that same noise texture is actually going into the normal map input as well. And I'm using the same kind of color ramp as well. Just slightly altered, that's why it's duplicated, but same kind of thing. So that the low roughness areas are also going to be low normal map strength to create really smooth areas to help show like the puddles. So that's how I get that like really reflective, like wet floor kind of look, is just this right here. And then, yeah, it's just the normal map from the texture. So that's that right there. That's it. Very simple, but very effective shading setup. Doesn't look good in the white void, but in an actual render, it does look really nice. So that's kind of taking care of a lot of the detail. And if I look at the UV map, it's scaled up quite a bit. It's 4K texture as well. Set it to 4K. It's not in here, but it is 4K. And then, yeah, just kind of scale it up to, you know, you don't want it to be like super low resolution in the foreground. So obviously scale that up as much as you need to. And then the noise texture will break up the pattern. So you can kind of scale it up as much as you want within reason. And you're not going to get that like repeating texture look, because the noise will break it up. Okay, so that's layer 1, is just a floor plane, right? No displacement on this one, just the roughness map only, and normal map. Okay, then layer 2 is this stuff right here. So again, start with the small stuff, then move to kind of bigger and bigger chunks. So we've got like little like debris things here. I did like a little rigid body simulation with this and did a little thing with that, but you like, look how simple this is, right? It's a bunch of like brick cube things that you can just kind of place into a pile. It doesn't have to be complicated, right? Very simple in this case. Just model some basic ass shit here with like, you know, some beveled cubes and put it in a pile. And that's what we're dealing with here. And then you just put a texture on it and then kind of put it into a little pile, make one of them. Obviously, like spend a bit of time making it kind of good. This is not good, but like make it not terrible so that it looks okay from a medium distance. And then you could just duplicate that like 5-6 times in a row, duplicate it a bunch more times in the background if you need to. And then that's that right there. So it's kind of serving the same purpose. It's kind of serving the same purpose as those rocks in the other renders or whatever. Then we've got these like little like panel things that kind of look like they fell off the main cube. But this here is just, again, a flattened cube with a bevel on it, right? And a texture. And it doesn't have to be something complicated. It can be just something simple, but it depends on the environment, right? Like in this context, this makes sense, and it looks good. And so your stuff can be like really low poly and low quality if you place it a little bit far away from the camera and you kind of hide it in darkness maybe. And that's that right there. And then the third level of detail is this right here. So I've got some geometry nodes scattering some tiny like little rocks like this. If I just turn off the overlays. So that's kind of like the finest detail on here. The finest, smallest detail is just these little rocks here. What this is just like a low poly. I literally made a thing like this where it's like a cube and then like subdivide with like some things like this and then just kind of morph it into a little pebble like this or whatever and like shrink it down. Like that's what these are on the ground. It's just that like with geometry nodes scattered onto the floor. So whether you want to use geometry nodes, whether you want to hand place 100 in a little circle and then duplicate that, it doesn't matter. The thing that matters is just, getting a bunch of these little tiny things scattered all over. This is just the standard geometry nodes kind of shading, or not shading, but node setup that you'll see in any like beginner geometry nodes tutorial. So distribute points on faces, instance on points, and then just like the rocks are going in there, random value on the scale, random value on the rotation, and one more layer of that with like a bigger or smaller version of it. And then that's that right there. So you can do that with the particle system. You can hand place a little cluster and then duplicate that cluster. You can copy keep calling it the shading setup. The geometry node setup that I'm using here, it doesn't matter. Just get a bunch of little things kind of scattered everywhere, whatever it is. And that's going to help, again, just bring it to the next level of detail. So same trend, start with the big chunk, go to the medium chunks, small chunks at the end. So I hope you found that interesting and how it's like the same exact recurring theme in most of the renders that I do. Obviously, there's going to be exceptions. I kind of chose ones here that follow the same structure very clearly, but in all renders that I do, it's usually something similar to what I just showed there. So again, do go and check out the newest Cyber Environments course, especially if you made it this far in the video. You'll probably really like that. So there's a link below to that if you want to learn how to make this render and a bunch of other renders from scratch on your own and go and make a bunch of awesome stuff. So link below to that. Other than that, thank you for watching. I hope this was helpful. Stay tuned for more videos coming soon, and see ya.